Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm really excited about today's guest, Jon Kidwell, and he is a leadership coach and consultant. He's also the author of the book, Redefine Your Servant Leadership, where you're challenged to amplify your integrity, influence, impact. It's a really fantastic discussion for the audience about leadership, servant leadership, and I'm really excited to dive into it and talk about the details of Jon's book. So, Jon, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I love this. You're also a podcast host of the Leadwell podcast, and we'll talk more about that. And kind of introduce yourself to the audience, how you got started, and what led you to write your book and do what you're doing now.
Awesome. Thank you. So I tell everybody that I got started in this entrepreneurial journey of building a leadership development company because I got fired. And my wife tells me that you didn't get fired, you got laid off. And I said, well, it felt the same. That's really where it started, is where my last kind of corporate relationship ended. And through this journey of building business ideas, doing some job searching, moving big old heavy stuff in my backyard so that I don't go crazy. I was trying to figure out, like, what am I not just going to do, but what am I supposed to do? What do I want to do? And it was about 6 months for me. And she and I, my wife, she's wonderful. She's a great coach. She just doesn't practice it professionally like you and I do. But we're sitting there, and after a big discussion, she goes, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to help leaders be at their best. I want to help them do this well. And she goes, that's something. Let's get after it. And so that's really the genesis of the whole Leadwell business and all that we're doing is it started there. And for me, writing this book, Servant Leadership, Redefine Your Servant Leadership, because that's the model that I ascribe to, right? That if you ask me, Chris, like, tell me about your leadership style, I'd be like, I'm a servant leader. However, for me, there was this box that what that meant because of a lot of narratives. And so this is the book that I wish that I had to take me through the 10-year journey that I went through, redefining my servant leadership and how to do that in a way that brought all of the servant heart that big, caring servant leaders have, but also bring in the business mind that is needed to be able to build healthy, high-performing, thriving teams and organizations.
I love that. And especially in today's times, we need more models, more new paradigms about leadership, and we just need a new framework. So I've heard of this term servant leadership, and for the audience out there, elaborate on that because they've heard of it and but they may not understand like the nuances. So what does it look like? What does it mean?
Yeah.
Redefine it.
Yeah. So it's a great thank you for the setup. And because there's so much misinformation and just misunderstanding about it. So one of the big things that I point out is that Forbes did an article and they said traditional leadership versus servant leadership. And it's like, oh, these are different. And not only are they different, if we put the word versus in there, they seem to be at odds with each other, and they are not. But let's pull through some of that. So Forbes put out this article that says traditional leadership is where the leader focuses on motivation, direction, kind of inspiration for the people, and the overall kind of success and direction of the organization in the marketplace. And I'm sure if you and I were just sitting having coffee, we'd be like, well, I want that, right? And I want a leader that is focused on that. And then it says that servant leaders are different because their primary goal is to serve the people around them. Again, nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful, right? It's serving, doing things for your benefit, Chris, for the benefit of the audience, for the benefit of my team. That's awesome, right? Like, not bad. However, they go on to say, but, right? That big old but. But servant leaders don't focus on the entire organization. They just focus on the people that are below them, that are directly reporting to them. And this is like the big red flag that's kind of behind the curtain of all of these myths and cultural narratives around servant leadership. Is like, if you and I pull that back, that means that if I ever actually want to lead a business, if I want to be the entrepreneur kind of in charge of my business, if I want to be the CEO of this organization, at some point I have to give up this idea that I need to be a servant leader. And that's completely untrue. The other thing that goes into that is some of what most of us think about in servant leadership, where inside that article it says they just focus on the people below them. And servant leaders in kind of the traditional model, they say that they flip that org pyramid or that org chart and they place themselves at the bottom, right? So that they can serve the people and prioritize the people. So immediately there's all this stuff that's just kind of unraveling for me and for others of like, wait a second, like these two things do not line up. There is something going on here because I want to be a leader that's motivational, inspirational, focused on success and service in the marketplace so that we thrive. But I can also respond in a way that's for my people, for the benefit of the work that we do, for the bottom line of the organization. And that can be a service. And I don't have to think about people as above or below me. They're just people, right? And so all of these pieces were going there. And for me, what that meant is that I thought as a servant leader, I had to be a people pleaser, that I always had to be nice, conflict avoidant, kind of naive, and that as soon as we did anything talking about business, everybody else was going to write it off as, oh, you actually don't care about people. It's just been about business the whole time, and you've had this whole facade. And that is what I realized I was feeling. And as I started connecting with other folks that like raised their hand and say, yeah, I'm a servant leader, they were thinking the same thing. So servant leaders were thinking, oh, we have a less than leadership model. And other traditional leaders are looking and saying, this is never going to work because you're totally taking out the business side of things. And so in kind of my journey and process, it was, what does it actually look like for these two things to be put together? Servant leadership. And I came up with servant leaders are that they're servant hearted, they're business minded, and they are driven by a mission that is bigger than the whole thing. And so then as a leader who is a servant, I serve with the mission in mind. I serve the people. That's not my goal, but that's my path to achieve the goals that we have. And I also serve the results, that I do care about why we do it. I care about the people and I care about the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love how you put things together and you personalized it into a form that you're able to help others. And moving on is talking about this idea of the book. And I really want to delve into the details of the book. And you just, in your book, you discuss leading in the tension of various dualities and elaborate on some key strategies for balancing these dualities and daily leadership practice.
Gosh, that's such a good question. And I don't know if you feel this. I feel this where it's like I'm on a platform. And honestly, a lot of the times leaders feel like they're on a platform, like there's this big old spotlight kind of shining down and everything is being critiqued. And in the book, we call it the Hercules hold, where if you've ever seen The World's Strongest Man, they're standing on a platform and they're holding these big 350-pound pillars, right? And it's just like ripping them apart. And that's the tension that we get to live in as servant leaders, as leaders in general, whether that's kind of how you describe yourself or not. That on one side, how do I treat people? How do I interact with people? And on the other side, you're holding that giant pillar of performance, right? We're doing this to be able to provide a service to others and livelihood to ourselves, and maybe even for some larger purpose kind of in the world. And you're holding those things together. And so living in that tension looks like clarifying expectations and holding people to the accountability pieces they've already agreed to. Holding that tension looks like saying, goodness gracious, I do not want to go have this conversation with Chris because it's going to be a hard conversation. And we got to talk about the fact that, you know, there was a misunderstanding or you've done something on the team. But at the same time, I know that on the other side of doing that, there's opportunities for a healthier relationship and for better outcomes in the workplace. And this is what we get to hold together. And sometimes we think, I'm just going to let go of this one. I'm just no more performance, no more, you know, great healthy relationship on the other side of conflict. I'm just going to hold on to the people or avoid the conflict. And what happens? That 350-pound pillar is just going to fling you over and it's going to hurt other people and you as you go. And so leading in the tension is taking these things that when we just look at it immediately, we're like, these are at odds, people and high standards in performance. Really getting clear on expectations and then having to have a follow-up conversation on accountability. That really going in and saying, we are doing something bigger than ourselves. So we're going to be absolutely generous and we're going to have profits, right? A lot of the times we think these things are like oil and water, but they're actually something that create a stronger leadership inside of us, kind of self-leadership, but also creates a healthier, stronger organization when we're able to hold these things together.
Yeah, and I love how you're describing it. And upon the book, which I recommend the audience check it out, it'll be in the links in the show notes. At its core, it's a personal growth, and a lot of people say that leadership is developed and you can nurture it. And so, how do we reinforce what we learn so that we actually put it into practice and make positive changes?
Yeah, yeah. It is a personal, professional development growth book at its core, right? And how do we reinforce this as leaders? That's what we want to do. And I don't know about you, and I don't know about the audience, but oftentimes I get the sense that I read this book, I go to a training, and I got to come back and I got to make a big swing, right? Everything was once this way, now it's going to be all this way. And like on some things, we need to make that mental switch of, okay, I'm doing things in a new way. I'm setting this like a new year or a new job. But honestly, the way that you start is small steps. Small steps serve extremely well. It's not going in and saying, okay, this big old hairy audacious conflict, or the fact that we haven't had accountability conversations in 10 years, or that we've never made a profit, or that we've never given away some of our profit to things we care about. Now we got to go all in on that. It's honestly going to confuse everybody. It's going to become such a burden that you can't carry it. That what we need to do is actually start taking small steps. So we guide people through laying out a SMART goal, because smart, small steps serve well. So a SMART goal, and then immediately starting to take the smallest action that you can take towards that. I'll give you one of mine that was mine kind of in that process of redefining my servant leadership. I am, by all hands and all accounts, prefer to avoid conflict. And I know that that is something that, when done well, can actually help create healthier relationships. And so at one point, my goal was to disagree with an idea, an individual, or a piece of information one time a week for 6 months. And so I just kept walking in that. It didn't mean that I had to hit every single conversation perfectly. It meant that once a week, I was going to do something intentional to disagree and to put myself in a place where I needed to have crucial conversations and then work through that over 6 months. So once you have smart goals and small steps, we tell leaders, you need to build your leadership team. You need a personal leadership team, because we have confused it's lonely at the top. We think that that means we don't get people, when in fact it means we need people, because the thing that is lonely is responsibility. Nobody understands the responsibility that you hold in the organization. Nobody understands the responsibility you have with your family. Nobody understands the responsibility you carry in life. Doesn't mean that you don't get people. It actually means that you need people. So build out your personal leadership team. You need a coach. You need a mentor. You need a cheerleader, because it's really hard sometimes. You need a friend that you do not work with. And then you need a friend, a partner that you do work with, someone that can complement you really well. And so build out your personal leadership team, and then use your personal leadership team. Go to them, have them help hold you accountable, have them encourage you, have them come alongside you. SMART goal, small steps, build that team, and use that team as you keep walking out.
I love that. And as we're coming to the kind of the end of the conversation, one thing is talking about is this continual growth in leadership, and the leadership is an ongoing process. It's not just, just one step. And you mentioned reading a book or going to a course or seminar, come back inspired. But how do you recommend leaders reinforce and build upon the principles of servant leadership to ensure sustained personal and professional growth?
Awesome. So at the end of the book, we introduce these wonderful, wonderful people, Alan and Catherine Barnhart. They're absolutely phenomenal individuals, philanthropists, business leaders, and they were able to amplify the self leadership in their own servant leadership throughout their entire organization. And so, one of the things that they do is they work these things into the mission and the vision of the organization and into their lives, that they have lives that are aligned with those. They have lined out this redefined servant leadership way before I ever engaged with them. They are just an amazing story of how this has been amplified. But inside of their organization, Barnhart, Crane, and Rigging, they laid out the values that they had. They started with servant leadership and they described it in a way that was just different than the way that we might traditionally describe it. They do talk about trust and belonging and that that's something they value and want to build. But then they also talk about progress and compensation as a part of servant leadership. And it's like, people usually don't put those together. This is awesome. They talk about excellence and quality. And then at the very end, one of their core values is profits for a purpose. And they say through their profits, they're going to grow and give to the people, to the business, and to the larger community and world. And so they have baked those in. And then they've just continuously walked in that for years. They started this in the 80s. Where they are today is Barnhart, Crane, and Rigging is a $600 million organization. Allen's CEO rating is 98%. The average CEO is like in the 70s. So there's like, whoop, their tenure in their organization is over 6 years, where average is like 4-1 and falling, right?
Mhm.
And they give away $50 million a year. And that's only half of their profits. Half of their profits, $50 million, go out to causes they care about so that they can bless and serve all around the world. 50% get back invested into the people, to the business, so that they can continue to grow that. And so that is, it's an awesome framework, and it has completely amplified their servant leadership in their lives, in their business, and honestly around the world. They're making a tremendous impact.
I love that. How can people reach out to you and find out more about you, check out the book, and find out more about the work that you do?
Thank you so much. So I would love to connect. The best way where I'm most engaged is on LinkedIn, and it's at Jon Kidwell. At Instagram, it's at jon.kidwell. There's no H in those. You can't hear it, so I don't use it. And then the website for the business is leadwell.com. And if you want the book, head on over to the title of the book, redefineyourservantleadership.com.
There, let's thank Jon for coming on and talking about servant leadership. Be sure to follow him on all his socials and check out the book. It's on Amazon as well. And with that, thanks so much for coming on.
Chris, this has been so fun. Thanks for having me.